Hi there, Benji Sandero, part-time film YouTuber. Do you know how many music biopics I saw last year? 4! Yeah, that's right. 4! People have been saying for a few years now that these films have been getting out of hand. And if this isn't a sign, then I don't know what is. So let me quickly recap you on what those films were. The first one being Bob Marley One Love, which was just awful. I heard no one mention this when it released, and now it gets the same level of discussion as the death of Raymond Haynes. The second being Back to Black, which wasn't the best. Come on, we can do better. The third was A Complete Unknown, which was the first one that was passable. In fact, I actually thought it was alright. It's just I don't think it deserved the critical acclaim that it did from award ceremonies and critics alike. And the fourth and final one was this. It is a shame that not a lot of people have talked about Better Man in great detail, mainly because of the lack of knowledge on who Robbie Williams is to American audiences, and because it made less than half of what Back to Black made, which was the lowest grossing biopic out of the others I mentioned before. But let me tell you this, not only did it have the best reviews out of all the other biopics I've mentioned, not only did it make me enjoy a musical, which is a genre that I'm not the biggest fan of.
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
Not only did it have the talent of Michael Gracie behind it, the man who directed The Greatest Showman and who was originally meant to direct Rocketman, but it also subverted the music biopic formula, which I'm sure you can agree has been milked to death for pretty much a decade now. And hey, let's jump into how it did that. I'm sure a good majority of you watching this already know what this formula is, but for anyone who isn't aware of this formula, I'll quickly go over it and present some examples from other music biopics. They start with the subject having a rough upbringing, the meeting of the manager or the studio producer, their launch to stardom, normally with the release of their first big hit, footage in the studio where we see the artist record their music, the meeting of the love interest, the one moment that makes the musician that musician, drug consumption and rehab, then back to doing what they love right at the end. Now, even though all of what I said is present in Better Man, the formulaic approach on the surface that it looks like it has starts to disintegrate right away with the opening of the film. Our introduction to Robbie has him growing up, out of place, to all the other kids in Stoke-on-Trent. Thank God it's not Birmingham. And he doesn't seem to fit in. So when he goes home and for a brief moment bonds with his dad via music, he messes up and causes him to get angry, only for his nan to comfort him, telling them things are going to be okay. Then cutting to Robbie's dad leaving him, followed by an emotional cover of Feel. Compare this to Ray and Walk the Line, which also start with Ray Charles and Johnny Cash as children, having devastating things happen to them when they're children, which coincidentally is the loss of both of their brothers. Even though I think we can agree someone dying is worse than someone leaving, we feel more emotionally connected to Better Man's subplot because we spend a lot of time with Robbie during his awful experiences. The first 10 minutes of this film is simply Robbie trying to make the most of his time as a kid, and then something bad happening to him, over and over again. These moments aren't used for shock matter either, or are shoved into our face to immediately try and get us to sympathise with the artist for the remaining hours of the film. It instead attempts to humanise a famous singer who is well known for being boastful and controversial, and I think it definitely succeeds here. Another way it subverts the genre is the tired and repetitive scene in every biopic where the artist is recording music and someone tells them that what they just sang was really good. What do we learn from this? Films like Straight Outta Compton and A Complete Unknown are the main culprits of this. But at least A Complete Unknown had Timothée Chalamet expressing to us that the keyboard player is pretty good, instead of flat out telling us. So what does Better Man do to avoid this trope? Well, for a start, Better Man has Robbie repetitively try and sing a line for Relight My Fire until he gets it right. You may be thinking that this is exactly like the two comparisons I made before, but what makes the scene in Better Man stand out is the aftermath. Yes, Robbie eventually nails his line delivery, but the reaction from his colleagues is that of "Finally!" instead of
"Hey, that's pretty good."
They act like they want Robbie to get his lines over and done with, which bruises his self-esteem a lot. But it gets worse when Robbie witnesses Gary record his lines in the recording booth and he nails his seemingly first time, further damaging his self-esteem and leading Robbie to fall into an addiction with drugs and alcohol. Now, what about the structure of Better Man? Well, for a start, it doesn't begin by foreshadowing the end of the film, like how Bohemian Rhapsody foreshadows Live Aid and La Bamba foreshadows Richie Valens' plane crash. But I'll give La Bamba this. Very few people are aware of Richie Valens' life, so starting the film with an event that not many people are aware of and drawing you in by doing this. As dark as it sounds, it creates suspense. It leaves you wondering what the tone of the rest of the movie is going to be like. What exactly are you getting from Rami Malek coughing, And with Live Aid, most people associate that with Queen's performance. So by showing this at the start of the film, you already know where the plot's going to end. So you're not really building yourself up for anything new or innovative. But for Better Man's plot, it doesn't follow a usual 3-act structure. Instead, the movie completes a goal and then introduces us to another one, then completes that, rinse and repeat. Let me explain. It works a little like an indie movie, but instead it's a $110 million indie movie. Robbie's goal when he's a teenager is to become famous. He ends up completing this goal when Take That gets signed to a record label, and that's expressed through the rock DJ sequence. Then he wants his own recognition as a solo artist, which he gets from Guy Chambers via the Something Beautiful music number. Then he wishes to perform at Nebworth, which eventually he does during the Let Me Entertain You music number, and so on and so forth. Not only do the musical numbers serve as moments when Robbie completes a side quest in his life, but they also serve as turning points for him, whether they be happy like the use of My Way, or sad like the use of Angels. It also helps that the film truly starts when Robbie is a teenager and ends just after his solo career peaks, and he learns to slow down. It doesn't overstay its welcome with films like Walk the Line and I Wanna Dance with Somebody, which have scenes from Johnny Cash and Whitney Houston's life that you could cut and we could have the same understanding of the artist by the end. From the moment when he joins Take That to the moment he learns to slow down and appreciate his musical career. It is eventful and jam-packed with most of what we know about him. And if you don't believe me or what I said sounds unsure, Robbie Williams as of recording this is 51 years old, and the oldest he's ever portrayed in a film is at 29 years old. You just know a standard biopic would include those 20 plus years. But Better Man doesn't overstay its welcome. It instead focuses on the period that made Robert Williams Robbie Williams, as well as some sick tunes too. Further talking about the use of music, the fact that the film is a musical really helps, as it immediately doesn't feel like a greatest hits of the artist's songs for 2 hours. Most music biopics like Bohemian Rhapsody or Elvis seem to have a checklist of all of the artist's most well-known songs and attempt to fit them in all within the span of that film. Heck, Bohemian Rhapsody uses 20 Queen songs within the span of 2 hours and 14 minutes. That's a song being played every 6 minutes and 42 seconds. Let's be generous and say that a song plays for about a minute in length. That's still about 5 minutes every time you're interrupted with it. No! For real though, during this segment of Another One Bites the Dust, what am I really learning about Freddie Mercury except that he goes out to gay clubs? However, a musical uses music in a more concise and visually stimulating way. I mean, film is a visual medium after all. For example, just look at the rock DJ sequence and how brilliantly thought out and impressive that whole scene is. The illusion of a one-shot take immediately allows us to take in the entire setting that is Regent Street. The numerous costume changes throughout to represent the different styles of Take That during their career. The large scale of the choreography. And remember when I said film is a visual medium? Well, the scene easily achieves more in 3 minutes and 42 seconds than the entire runtime of Bohemian Rhapsody. Two easy examples off the top of my head that stand by this claim is this part with the Union Jack illuminating on the pavement, as well as the red and blue umbrellas to show their dominance of the UK music industry in the 90s. And this part where Robbie is on top of the bus and the wings light up, represent that this is the moment where Robbie's fame and the band's fame take off. And the soundtrack, unlike Bohemian Rhapsody, doesn't feel bloated, with only 13 songs included. It also helps that only 8 of those songs come from Robbie's solo career, with another 2 being Take That songs, yet another 2 being cover songs, and an original song made specifically for this film. There's a lot of diversity for anyone who isn't a fan of Williams' music, and since this is a musical, it allows the songs to be tweaked for a musical setting, so there's a chance you might like Robbie's songs in a musical setting. I can personally vouch for this. I think Come Undone is a fine song overall. Nothing bad, but nothing revolutionary. But the musical version in Better Man is so gripping and ear-catching that it's probably my favourite song in the film. And this goes with a good majority of the songs in the film, such as Angels, Something Beautiful, and Rock DJ to name a few. Now, I think it's fair that I bring up the one drawing point of this film, which is the fact that Robbie Williams is a monkey. Some people have said that this is a gimmick in order to stand out to all the other biopics being pumped out relentlessly, and I heavily disagree. Most musicians are described as wild and crazy behind the scenes, which fits with Robbie, as in real life he's known for being a cheeky monkey and a party animal. Don't believe me? It even says on the radio during the Come Undone sequence. The fact that he's a monkey also allows the musical numbers to have more movement, like in the rock DJ sequence where he jumps on the back of the bus and does a backflip to the edge of the bus, and that big duel during the Let Me Entertain You sequence. You either have to be the best gymnast in the world, or something that is made up in order to do what he did. There's also the little stuff, like the way he looks around the table, and him destroying his bedroom when he's in rehab. No normal human being acts like this, and no normal film has a bunch of humans looking at one human in anger and disgust. The dark thoughts that Robbie has would not be as terrifying if they were human. Plus, they wouldn't stick out as much as the monkeys do in a massive crowd. Along with the fact that I don't think the scene where Robbie stabs his younger self would have flown with audiences if they were real life actors. Not sure if that was an important thing. Anyway, I believe that the filmmakers and Williams himself saw a human betraying Robbie as impossible, considering how he acted and how outlandish his lifestyle was in the past. So I feel like portraying him as a monkey allows the audience to closely connect with him more, because who doesn't like animals? But I think the main gripping point of the film that completely smashes any other biopic out of the water is the humanity of it all. Specifically, Robbie's struggles and the relationships around him. Take Bohemian Rhapsody as an example. I know I keep mentioning Bohemian Rhapsody as an example, but this film just follows all the characteristics of a bland and generic music biopic. The more music biopics I watch, the more I find this irritating. The fact that I gave this a 5 out of 10 in my music biopics video is an embarrassment. It does nothing but I'm sure one of the
it'll
stop any second now.
in recent music history
Panders to the most generic audience possible. So Freddie's personal struggles in Bohemian Rhapsody are, what's the word? Lifeless. When we're introduced to Freddie, it's not like he's struggling or down on his luck, unless you want to count the racism he receives when he's working at Heathrow.
Wait, you missed one!
Even when he's writing lyrics, we get no explanation for what he's writing about. Look at this piece of paper and tell me you can understand what it says. If you type in the comments that you do, then there's only one option. You're a litterer and from Birmingham. You can't have one without the other.
Let me tell you about my best friend.
Also, look what he says when he writes down a lyric he thinks is good.
Oh, that's really good.
What? We don't even know what makes him think this. I know it's general conception that this guy is more of a narcissist than this guy, but for a brief moment, it's the opposite way round. But anyway, I'm getting a bit off track. When Robbie writes anything, we're given understanding as to what he writes about. After he meets Nicole after hitting rock bottom for the first time in the public eye, he writes down the lyric, "You can't manufacture a miracle." It's as simple as that, Bohemian Rhapsody. All you need is a little background as to why he's writing what he is. And also show who or what you're writing about. It's screenwriting 101. It's so easy, even Tommy Wiseau can do it.
How much is it?
It'll be
Here
$18.
you go. Keep the change. Hi, doggy.
You're my favorite customer.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
We also later see when he's talking about Guy Chambers that he's unsure about his lyrics, something that has been built up since his time in Take That. Also, side note, I love this scene with Guy and Robbie creating something beautiful, and it's just one shot, but it's edited to look like time has passed. It reminds me a lot of a scene in Nowhere Boy, where John Lennon is learning the guitar, and by cutting simultaneously in the same shot, we understand that time has passed and he's learned across the span of a good period of time. And speaking of relationships, it takes time to acknowledge the different relationships that Robbie has had, not just throughout his professional career, but throughout his whole life. I would use Bohemian Rhapsody as a comparison here, but I'd be beating a dead horse at this point, so I'll use Ray as an example instead. Despite its colossal runtime, I feel no connection that Ray has with any other character in the film, except maybe his mother. There's just not enough time into fleshing out the relationship he has with his wife Della, or his record manager Ame. I know this might be a bad thing to say, but it's like the filmmakers were thinking that since Ray Charles is blind, then anything negative that happens to him will immediately get our approval. I won't lie, it works with the scene where he's trying to cope with being blind without the need of his mother, but after that it just feels exploited. Better Man also takes this approach of focusing on the relationships Robbie Williams had, but unlike Ray, any negatives Robbie has isn't exploited throughout the movie. For example, when he meets Nicole Appleton, we have a sense that Nicole sympathises for Robbie because of his departure from Take That, and that she's also in a pop band. But this isn't the same with every other relationship. Take that. Take Robbie's relationship with Gary, for example. Every problem both of them have is not one-sided or basic like in Ray. Heck, there's a scene in Ray where he literally gets money stolen from him, then a scene where Ray takes heroin despite his wife disapproving of it. A 7-year-old could determine who is in the wrong in these scenes. But for Robbie and Gary, there's numerous times throughout where you have mixed feelings about who is in the wrong and who is in the right. Just look at the Relight My Fire musical number, Robbie starting the performance on the floor, and despite clearly being incapable of performing, he gets ridiculed by Gary, which he retaliates by doing this. However, during this scene, there are moments that allow us to sympathise with both of them. Robbie is clearly incapable of performing, which makes us think he's being exploited. On the other hand, there is this close-up of Gary looking at Robbie during the performance, which I think is a look of concern rather than a look of despise. This is why editing is important, kids. And John Ottman, the guy who edited Bohemian Rhapsody, clearly showing a concerning side of Gary that doesn't have that much focus throughout the film, only really coming full circle near the end when he's happy to rekindle with Robbie at the end. And that's what I'd say the movie's about: growth. It's no wonder that all the relationships Robbie has in the movie, apart from one, are given time at the end for Robbie to reconcile with. Look at Bohemian Rhapsody. Wait, I said I'm not going to beat this dead horse. But it's so easy, Benji, to talk about its negatives. Don't you start, Willem Dafoe. It must not mention Bohemian Rhapsody. Screw it. At the start of this thing, Freddie is presented to have a quote-unquote strained relationship with his father. There are 2 scenes establishing this, and no more. I mean, look on the bright side. Bohemian Rhapsody has more scenes with father problems than Walter Mondale once states in the 1984 US election. Then just as Freddie goes off to perform at Live Aid, his father does this? Let's just go back to Better Man before I lose more of my mental state. Like I said, Better Man takes time with Robbie's relationships. You guys understanding so far? You guys still there? But the Better Man musical number gives us comfort, and shows Robbie seeking comfort with past people, and looking after himself, more than whatever this is. But the only relationship Robbie doesn't fix at this point is with his dad, which gets solved during the ending when Robbie and his dad sings My Way. I also find it important that once Robbie's dad calls him one of the gods, he allows Robbie to continue to sing the rest of the song by himself. It shows that he finally understands that Robbie's talent and career is far bigger than his ever was, showing growth for other characters other than Robbie Williams. Then the movie ends. Man, what a film. Probably the best music biopic since Love and Mercy. It's a shame that the film didn't even come close to breaking even at the box office, and only received one singular Oscar nomination for visual effects, whilst Emilia Perez got 13! I'm passionate about this movie because it tried. It took a risk, and while it may not have paid off completely, I can say confidently, in terms of quality, it 100% paid off. I know this isn't the first musical biopic, nor the first music biopic with an outlandish concept. It is straight up a well-made biopic about a British pop star who just so happens to be a monkey. If there's one thing I want to accomplish with this video, it's that I want to wake people up, watch this movie, and appreciate it for being a brilliantly made musical. And if you don't think it's a good movie, then, well, wait, what was the point of this video?